Welcome back to another edition of History in Your Own Backyard. I'm Susie Selleck, and today we are in Wilmington, Ohio, at the Wilmington Friends Meeting House, and I'm here with Ruth Brindle. Ruth, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely, glad to be here.
Yeah, so what's the feeling people are supposed to get when they walk into this place?
The idea really is just a feeling of peace, a feeling of inner quiet. The idea behind the design of Quaker meeting houses ever since the very beginning of Quakerism was about letting people focus on the worship experience and getting rid of distractions.
Anything flashy.
Yeah.
Cool. I like that. Why do you guys call it a meeting house and not a church? Because I feel like I'm in a church because you guys do churchy stuff in here, which is
Absolutely.
cool. But
Yeah.
what's up with that?
So the very early Christians made this distinction about the church was the body of Christ, the body of believers. And that got to be a really important distinction for early Quakers about maintaining that idea that the church is what's important and the church is the people, not the building.
Yeah.
So the idea of a meeting house is just literally the place where the church, the people, meet.
Very cool. I have a feeling a lot of the non-denominationals have adopted that, in time, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So why do you guys have the pews in a semicircle?
So the original traditional form of Quaker worship, starting back in the 1640s in England, was what we now call unprogrammed. There was no format, no order of worship, no planned message, no hymns, kind of the things that you come to expect on a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
In a Protestant church.
Yeah.
It was just the body of people gathering together and waiting to be led to speak, waiting for God, for the presence of Christ to be with them. And that meant that anybody could speak, could stand and share a message that they were given.
Wow.
Yes. And so then that gets reflected in the design of this building, because then it becomes very practical. You want this kind of semicircle so that when, Jane Doe stands up in the back on that side, Joe Smith over there can hear what she's saying, because what she has to say is meant for the whole room and the whole group.
Yeah. All right. And I noticed you have Julie as your minister's name. Yeah. And how long? Always women able to lead the church?
Actually, yes. From the very earliest days, one of the things that made Quakers distinctive, and also got them in trouble, was this idea that anyone could be a minister, even, gasp, women. So in the very earliest days, you had Quaker ministers. What you see then is a lot of Quaker involvement, a lot of Quaker women involved in all sorts of things throughout American history, where at periods in time where other women weren't
silenced. Yeah.
So a lot of the female leaders of the abolition movement were Quaker women. The women's rights movement in the early 20th century was really heavily influenced by Quakers, because these were women who grew up in this tradition of taking leadership roles and speaking in public.
Wow. Love that.
Yeah.
There aren't any crosses in here. Why is that?
It's not that the idea, right? The meaning of those symbols is obviously very important to Quakers as Christians.
Yep.
But it gets at that idea of kind of that same simple, no distraction design of the meeting house. Because anytime you have a symbol, different people are going to interpret it differently, and some people, right? And so the idea is, without having the physical symbol there, then people can focus on the meaning behind it and not on that physical thing hanging on the wall.
All right. And your walls, there's also some windows built into these walls. They are beautiful, but not the typical stained glass windows that you see inside a normal, like a cathedral or something like that. So can you elaborate a little on that?
Absolutely. You're used to seeing depictions of, biblical stories and historical Christian figures and things. And again, it's not that those stories aren't important to Quakers,
right,
but again, it's that idea of distraction, and also kind of a step towards being able to just focus on the worship experience. And their early Quakers were very particular about kind of what they considered worldly things intruding on the spiritual life. And so stained glass windows were considered art, and art was a worldly thing. So we have these gorgeous stained glass windows, but they're very just kind of, they're like non-specific. They're very much a compromise kind of between the traditional Quaker, which would have had no stained glass whatsoever.
Right.
And kind of wanting to have something like that, but not kind of going
Taking
the way.
it all the way to flashy and fancy.
Yeah.
Okay. When was this building built?
This building was built in 1895.
Okay.
And the town at that point, there were about 3,000 people here, which now doesn't seem very big, but the town had gone through this huge boom, kind of post-Civil War. Wilmington College was established in 1870, a Quaker college here in town. There was kind of a building boom in the 1880s and 1890s. There was a Presbyterian church, a large Presbyterian church across the street in what's now a parking lot. And the other parking lot on the other side was the original city building that was this gorgeous, beautiful structure. So there was this real feeling of optimism and growth. And this was obviously like long before the interstates. And Wilmington was like right on the way between Cincinnati and Columbus. So it was an important place, kind of, in the culture of that point in time. So there was this feeling of optimism, this feeling of growth, combined with, in American religious history, this whole wave of revivals, and what they kind of an extension of what was called the Second Great Awakening. And so there was this huge boom and growth in American Protestant denominations at the same time because of these revivals. So this building, the sheer size of this building for a town of 3,000 was a reflection of that optimism, but also kind of this attraction, bringing new people into the meeting, bringing people to Quakerism. And that's also kind of why the building looks a little bit like it does. It looks less like traditional Quaker meeting houses. Trying to kind of attract people who weren't Quakers.
It's hard not to look at your ceiling and kind of have your jaw dropped, right? So was this part of the original structure?
It was. It really was. And, we did some digging because we started asking ourselves questions about that. Like, why is that designed the way it is? And I really think it's part of that kind of compromise that Quakers really as a whole were going through in the 1890s. Like, we want to stick to our traditional forms and our traditional beliefs, but we also want to attract new people and people who, might be turned off by what was seen as kind of stern and reserved kind of Quaker style. So it's this really kind of interesting, really elaborate, but not
that it's taking away from the message and the worship. Okay. Music is obviously a big part of your services. Services, right? Okay. So I see the piano and the organ. Where are the organ pipes?
So the organ was not an original part of the building because, again, original traditional Quaker worship style, if someone felt led to stand and sing, that was okay. But you didn't have this kind of, now we're all going to rise together and sing hymn number 42 or whatever. Because of the emphasis on kind of the spontaneous, the spirit-led nature, as opposed to like planning out what we're going to say of the worship service. But again, as Quakers were kind of becoming more involved in the broader world and attracting more non-Quakers, there was really then this push, like, we need an organ. We want organized music. Organized. And so, but again, that kind of compromise and that balance, and so they found a way to install the organ, but all of the stuff that you would usually see with the organ.
That's so grand. Because it's grand.
Exactly. So the pipes are actually built into the ceiling, and the bellows for the organ are actually under the front stairs.
Oh my gosh!
So you have this amazing sound, and you get this gorgeous music without that visual distraction of the pieces and parts of the organ. There's wooden grate in the ceiling is where the pipes are, and so that's how you hear the. And so a lot of then what you see up front then in the meeting house, like obviously the choir loft was added on, as well as the organ being added in, and then now back behind the organ is where the bell choir plays. That was all benches just like this.
What's the biggest addition that's happened here with this building, and was that the choir loft?
Right. That was maybe the most controversial.
Okay.
There's a whole education wing that if you look at the outside of the building, it's very clear. Kind of one looks like, part of the building looks like 1895 and the other part looks like 1950s, because that's when it was put on in 1951. It was part of what you saw happening in cities and towns across the US in the 50s as part of the baby boom.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Suddenly you're building schools because we don't have enough schools for all these kids. And so the same thing was happening kind of in mainline Protestant churches. Now we've got all these kids in Sunday school and we just don't have enough room for them.
Gotcha.
So we added on it's a 3-story education wing in 1951.
Was that for Sundays only, or was that for like Monday through Friday and Sundays too?
Originally it was just for Sundays.
Okay.
But one of the really cool things about this meeting, about this particular group, is that really since the 70s, we've started kind of getting back to the original idea of a Quaker Meeting House. You know, in the 1700s, the Quaker Meeting House was really a community center. It was the school for the town. It was not just a Sunday morning space.
Mm-hmm.
And in the early 70s, Wilmington Friends Meeting started a daycare.
Okay.
Which in the 70s was still like really controversial, that you would trust your child to somebody else so that you would go off and work.
Right.
Instead of staying home with the kids. But part of kind of Quaker belief about social justice and equality, and if women want to go to work, then they should be allowed to go to work. So we're going to provide this service. So starting in the 70s, then that education wing kind of took on its own life. And so, like I said, we've hosted the daycare in the 70s, 80s, and I think up until the early 90s. We now have an adult day center.
Really?
So for elderly folks who really shouldn't be by themselves throughout the day.
Yeah.
That happens in this building Monday through Friday. We host, AA meeting.
Ruth, this has been 123 years that this building has been here. Is it going to be here in another 100?
You know, it's actually very interesting because that's a question that a lot of Western Christian denominations are asking themselves as we look at our communities and the needs of our communities and wanting to be responsive to that. Will Wilmington Friends, the church, the people be here in 100 years? Absolutely. We're not going anywhere. The building? I sure hope so. You know, it's a gorgeous building. We love the history. We love the story of the building. But I think Quakers are really pretty practical when it comes to looking at responding to the needs of the community. The building will probably still be here. Will we be in it? I hope so.
Yeah.
I really, really hope so. But it's also totally possible that it could become a community center and be open to all sorts of other uses so that other people have the opportunity to be in this amazing, very cool historic space.
Yeah. All right. Well, awesome. Ruth, you just nailed this, and I'm sure our viewers are going to be very enriched by hearing what you've had to say. So thank you.
So much. Thank you.
All right, thank you for watching another episode of History in Your Own Backyard. We are here today at the Wilmington Friends Meeting House here with Ruth. So I hope you enjoyed your time with us, and remember, travel slowly and stop often. Bye for now.